If, as they say, bigger really is better, then this could be one of the best utes in the world. Or maybe it's just so big and so bulky it's irrelevant in Australia. Either way, meet the 2023 Chevy Silverado. Now, while this update is basically a midlife facelift, it does usher in a new model called the ZR2. And this is an off-road oriented model that may be just what people are looking for. Now, all this bigness does not stop with the sheer size of the car. The price tag is pretty impressive too. In fact, Chevrolet will be asking $128,000 for the LTZ version and $133,000 for this, the ZR2. When you break it down though, the ZR2 starts to look like some kind of bargain. Because it's off-road oriented, you get a lot more gear. You get a better transfer case, you get lifted suspension, bash plates, tow hooks, and some very clever dampers. The ZR2 specification also adds a full-sized spare wheel, rear park assist, and a head-up display, but loses the LTZ side step, sunroof, and powered steering column adjustment. It's all a juggling act to try to make the ZR2 as bush-capable as possible, while also trying to compensate for the extra curb mass cutting into the vehicle's towing limit. When you think about it, when you can spend $90,000 pretty easily now on a mid-size pickup, maybe this ain't so dear after all. The revamp for 2023 involves some new styling cues and a redesigned interior. The Silverado range is bulked out with the ZR2 off-road oriented model, and because towing is such a feature of these vehicles, Chevy has gone in hard with 8 cameras and 14 potential points of view to make hitching and towing easier and safer. Beyond that, it's just bigger than Texas big. The huge grille dominates the front, and the Silverado casts a very large shadow indeed. If you ignore practicality, then you really have to ignore cars like this, full stop, fact. If it can't haul a big load and tow a small town, what's the point of owning a car this big and heavy and potentially thirsty? Well, the answer's not much. Luckily, Chevrolet's got it covered. The interior seats 5, it's huge. There's plenty of comfort, plenty of practicality there, and the tray is huge. 12 tie-down points, the ability to take a pallet between the wheel arches, and plenty of length, unlike most dual cab pickups that we're familiar with. Towing? Oh yeah, it'll tow. 4.5 tonnes for the LTZ and slightly less, 4.2 tonnes for this model, the ZR2. The catch is, if you do hook up the full 4.2 tonnes to the ZR2 model, suddenly your gross combination mass limits you to 68 kilograms of payload. And that means all the people and all the gear and all the petrol. In turn, that means that the only person that can really tow 4.2 tonnes of horses and horse floats is Michelle Payne herself. The cabin is home to lots of USB and charging ports and everything that opens and shuts. But that's only once you're in, and if you're a bit on the short side, the lack of side steps on the ZR2 model makes it a fair step up. The rear seat is better than previous Silverados, but we still reckon it's missing overhead grab handles in the right places, and the rear air vents are a bit underdone. Out the back in the tray, we're talking a load space that will fit a pallet between the wheel arches and is a useful 1776mm long, dwarfing a normal dual cab utes tray. It's still a long way up to the tray when you're loading or unloading, however. Under the bonnet of this car, there's nothing too techy or outrageous. It is instead 6.2 litres of all aluminium prime US beef. Power is 313 kilowatts, torque is 624 newton metres, and there's a 10-speed automatic transmission, and the car is all-wheel drive. It's also part-time all-wheel drive, so it does work as a two-wheel drive too. But a hybrid system to save a little fuel, don't make me laugh. And that lack of a hybrid or any other alternative power source means the Chevy likes a drink. The official combined fuel consumption number is a slightly frightening 12.2 litres per 100 kilometres, but in reality, that's more likely to be your highway cruising consumption. Around town, it could get a fair bit scarier than that. Based on those highway numbers, the 91 litre tank should give the Chevy a comfortable 700 kilometre range, assuming it's not towing anything at the time. Far and away, the biggest driving issue with the Silverado will be its vast footprint. This won't worry some people too much, or so they'll tell you, but for others, it will be an absolute deal breaker. You'll often find yourself looking for 2 parking spaces, not 1, and even though the steering is light, there's still a turning circle of more than 14 metres, so underground car parks and drive-throughs are going to present their own challenges. The big petrol V8 is a pretty nice thing to sit behind, and there's never any shortage of urge, even with a dirty great caravan hooked up, which we got to try at the launch. Of course, that again brings us back to our point that if you aren't planning on towing some big stuff, the Chevy is probably overkill. Ride quality is good on smoother roads, and even bigger bumps seem to leave the ute fairly unfazed. What ruins that illusion are roads that feature short, sharp or pattery bumps, which is when the suspension starts to betray the unsprung weight the chassis is dealing with. Off-road, the big Chevy has enough wheel travel and spectacular approach and departure angles, not to mention plenty of ground clearance, so it's very capable when the road stops and the wheel tracks start. The mud terrain tyres of the ZR2 are a nice touch here too, and actually weren't too noisy on the bitumen. The twin diff locks of the ZR2 will also make it a pretty formidable proposition when things get really sticky off-road. With 6 airbags and modern driver aids like active cruise control, rear cross traffic alert and stability control, the Chevy lifts the game for US-made pickups. That said, we'd still like to see high-speed autonomous emergency braking, whereas the ute currently has AEB only at speeds up to 80 kilometres an hour. It's worth mentioning too that vehicles like this one can be pretty aggressive towards anything they hit, like another car for instance, and that you'll probably find yourself relying on the onboard cameras dotted around the car for parking in tight spots. The Silverado hasn't been crash tested in Australia, but it has been in the US according to local standards there, where it scored all 5 stars for safety. The ownership experience is the one area where the Silverado maybe can't keep pace with many of the other offerings in this market that we're more used to. There's no cap price servicing, for instance, for one thing, but service intervals are also 12 months or 12,000 kilometres, rather than the 20,000 kilometre intervals of some. But the real disappointment is the warranty, which at 3 years and 100,000 kilometres is well short of the 6 and 7 year warranties we're now used to seeing, many of them with unlimited kilometres. On the plus side, Chevrolet does supply 3 years of roadside assistance. You don't need a master's degree in engineering to figure out pretty quickly what the Silverado is all about, and that's moving big, heavy things, particularly by way of a trailer. With that in mind, this style of ute has never been more relevant thanks to the spiralling size and mass of modern caravans and trailer boats. But if you haven't adopted that lifestyle yet and your main use for a ute is to take rubbish to the tip and deliver bark chips from the garden centre to home, then the Silverado's bulk, thirst and expense continues to make it a vehicle that will make little sense to some people. Not that that will keep the true believing Silverado buyers awake at night.